Everyone, welcome to Learning by Doing with Praveen Kandan. This is Praveen. In this Java exception handling playlist, you will learn exception handling concepts step by step. This is Java exception handling session number 4, exception classification and hierarchy in Java programming. If you are confident about learning, then like the video, subscribe the channel for more update. Please click the bell icon and select all notification options. Don't choose personalized options. You may miss some session updates. Let's get started. In our previous session, we discussed what's the difference between syntax error and logical error. After we have discussed overall what's the difference between error and exception. So please watch the session number 1, 2, 3, and then watch the session number 4 prerequisite. So what are the types of exceptions in Java? Usually exception means it is coming under the runtime part. Okay, so the errors means compile there is logical or syntax errors during the compilation time itself we can find out, but exceptions are occurring at runtime only. So Java has many exceptions, but we are mainly categorized into two types: checked exception and unchecked exception. So what is my checked exception? Important interview question. Many of the beginners will do mistakes. You just try to understand now itself clearly. So checked exception means exceptions that are identified by the Java compiler. See here, exceptions are identified by the Java compiler. Okay, the compiler warns a programmer about possible exception. This exception may occur. These exceptions may occur. So Java compiler itself warn the programmer. We will discuss these things in the real-time examples from the session number 5 onwards. So what's that compiler itself giving the warning? Okay. So I can show it here also a small snippet about this. Don't think too much about what is happening. Now just try to understand what is the checked exception. If I'm giving thread dot sleep up, I'm giving 1000. So here no logical error. Actually, it is wrong. Okay, I mean it is right. There is no issues. But as per the compiler, it is wrong. As a developer, you just try tell that as per the syntax thread dot sleep. So 1 seconds I'm 1000 means here milliseconds equal to 1 second. So 1 second your program is going to wait its process. Okay, so it will wait their process. So here what is showing unhandled exception type. So your program as per the syntax is right, but you are not handling this exception in the future. Actually, in future, we may or may not this exception. That is what we are clearly telling. So it will be identified the Java compiler. Java wants the programmer about possible exception. In case due to memory management, you can't able to okay out of memory, you can't able to wait the thread for 1 second means it may throw an exception. We can't give the guarantee. Definitely throw an exception, but it may happen. That is why here we are telling the problem as you have to handle this exception. So if I'm giving add throws declaration, see here now it will be completely clear. So no error is gone. And the error gone. Reason it is now just declaring throws interrupt exception. So we are handling this exception. Whether this exception what is that happening or not. Okay, may or may not be. Okay, may or may not be it will happen. So for safer side, we are giving throws. Is we can take a real time example. So always wearing the helmet is safety. Am I right? So accident may or may not be happen. But for safety side, what you are doing, we are just wearing the helmet. The same purpose. Exception may or may not be happen. So for that purpose, Java give the warning. Okay, you have to handle this exception. So that is the reason you're getting the error unhandled exception. So I'm giving now throws. This exception is happening. This exception is happening. So I will handle this exception. Throws interrupted exception. So now the problem sorted. I hope now we are clear with this instead of telling theoretically. So Java compiler wants to program about possible exception. So characteristics check it compile time itself. It won't want to the runtime. See here, compilation time itself, we are getting that error. Am I right? Compilation time itself, we are getting this error. So compiler forces the handling. We have to handle it. Otherwise, it will throw an error. Easier to identify now itself. Example: interrupted exception, file not found exception, IO exception. So what exception we have faced? No, interrupted exception. So the normal flow will be distracted. Okay, or disrupt. Or if I'm giving the input at the time, I can give the keyboard interrupt option. So if I'm executing normally, see here, if I'm executing this program, so I should give the input. The cursor is the control program console screen is waiting for giving the input. Example, if I'm giving 5, it will give the output 1 divided successfully, no issues. In case, so instead of giving the input, I'm giving some other statement here. See here. So due to keep mistake, okay, as a user, if I'm giving some other special symbols or something like that at so we'll give the exceptions. Okay, input mismatching exception or something else. So this is also one type of exception. Okay, but this is happening at runtime. Okay, so there will be many type of exception. Now just try to understand what is happening. Okay, again running this program. If I'm giving the normal input, no issues. Will give the output. Okay, so back to the topic. So interrupted exception, file not found exception. So if you're handling that file concept now, future will discuss. So the corresponding file may or may not be present. Am I right? We can't give the guarantee. So that is the problem here. File input stream I'm giving file object equal to new. I'm reading the file from the user. Okay, I'm reading the file from the user. So what error you are getting now? Unhandled exception file not for example. Here I can give the location also. Example C disk. Here I'm having a Java folder. We having this file name exception. So 100 percentage my code as per the syntax is right, reading the input. But what error getting? Unhandled exceptions. One minute, I have to give that escape sequence properly. Yeah. Yeah. Now see the output. Unhandled multiple markers. Wait, file is not as always a good practice to close this file. Fundamentals file dot close. Yeah. See the output now. So here there is no program mistake. Unhandled exception, type file not found exception because we can't give the guarantee. Definitely this file is present in my C disk under the Java folder. We having the exception. We can't give guarantee. Am I right? We can't give the guarantee now. It may or may not be present. So like that, how we are using the throws interrupted exception. See here. If I'm using this through the thread.sleep or file input, so compile itself give the warning, unhandled exception types, because we can't give guarantee 100% this code will work. See here, unhandled exception type, file not found exception. Here also unhandled type, file not exception. So this is coming under third one is IO exception, because we can't give guarantee that definitely will be closed. So for this, avoiding this problem, to avoid this problem, we are giving the throws here for safety purpose. Compile itself giving the warning, otherwise we'll get an error. I might compile itself giving the warning. So next, what's happening here? File handling. So here also I'm giving throws file not found exception. You have to give that comma here. Yes. Class. What is that? File dot close. So here also I should handle that IO exception. So now all the problem is sorted out now. See here. So now there is issue. There is no issue. So compiler itself giving the warning. You have to solve this problem. So if you know how to handle one exception, you can handle any exception because the handling process is same. See here. First, I try to understand throws interrupted exception. So this exception may or may not be occurring in future. For safety side, I'm giving this line. Next, IO. So I handled interrupted exception. Now I'm having the experience like using that file handling exception also. Okay. So throws IO exception, it is applicable. So to handle this input output exception, in case that file is not present, it will handle it. Okay. Now we are just discussing only in abstract level. In the forthcoming session, we'll execute in a hands-on manner. You'll get some more exceptions in a real-time exposure. Okay. So as of now, we have discussed about the checked exception. Now we are moving on to the unchecked exception. So these exceptions that are not identified by the compiler. Okay. So programmer must manually identify and handle them. So when this error will come means at runtime, compiler does not force handling. Okay. Example, I'm commenting all these lines. It will not executed now. See here, these exceptions are happening at runtime. Unchecked exceptions are handling at runtime. Example, if my sample input is now 0, so there is no compilation error. But what is that runtime? During runtime, we are getting the error. So that is what we are telling. Occur at runtime. Compiler does not force handling. Developer responsibility. Your compiler is not forcing like previous example thread.sleep or file input stream. Here there is no force instruction by the compiler. So as a developer, you have to handle it. Otherwise, you'll face the consequence. So that is the consequence you are facing here. At runtime, you are giving the error. That is exception. Line number 12. So divide by 0. Should handle that exception. Due to this reason, divided successfully or some statements are not executing. That disrupts the normal flow of the program. So due to line number 12, line number 13 is not executed. Okay. Like that, we're having a number of exception, arithmetic, null pointer, array index, out of bound. All these examples we'll discuss in from the session number 5 onwards. Okay. So first we'll start with the unchecked exception. There may be a question why we are starting with the unchecked exception, because compiler does not help much, because you can able to see here there is no compilation errors. So developer must understand and manage them carefully. Okay. So for that purpose, as a developer, we should learn it. So where and all we may get an exception. So particularly where and all user is giving, so our user is handling the inputs at that time, you should handle that exception before happening. You should give the code to handle that exception. So when and all we are getting this user input, so you may have the awareness about that. Here and all we may get a runtime exception. User may give an invalid input or wrong input or a incorrect output, incorrect input. So we have to handle this exception. So when all user is dividing by 0, at the time you have to handle that exception. If exception is occurring, it should not display the message like that. We have to handle that exception. So as a developer, you have to learn it. Okay, that is what they're telling you. So errors are syntax errors and logic errors. It is coming under the whose responsibility? Programmer or developer issues. But exception means what is that? So it is purely user input side. Okay, so user, if they are giving the invalid input, so where exception may occur. So runtime event occurring to causing the program termination, stopping the remaining lines of code. Stopping the remaining lines of code. So you should be aware about that. Okay. So it also in future it should handle by the user. So if that exception is occurring, program should not crash. Okay. So the final thing, exceptional mean. So it's a mechanism to handle this type of exception. So as a programmer developer, you should handle this exception. So allows the execution of remaining code, prevents program termination. So due to this exception, here line number 14 is not executed. Sorry, 13 is not executed due to line number 12 wrong input 0. So you should handle that. The remaining line number 13 and 14, 15 should be executed. Okay, so types of exception, checked exception and a runtime so unchecked exception. Checked exception means it will be identified by the compiler at compilation time itself before execution. Unchecked execution means programmer identify this because at runtime it is happening. So as a programmer or developer, identify this. Okay, so what type of exception may happen? I hope you are clear with this. So this is the classification and hierarchy. So if I'll try to understand what is happening, because we already discussed all these points. So where this exception is occurring. So this is the hierarchy of Java exception class. Throwable is the root class. Next, it is extended by the exception and error. We all discuss about inheritance concern, right? So this is the throwable is the parent class or super class of all the classes, and it is inherited by two subclasses or subclasses. What is the child classes? Exception and error, and then a further exception is classified into IO exception, SQL exception, class not found exception. One more thing, runtime exception. So four types it is classifying. Runtime exceptions are again classified into four types: arithmetic exception, null pointer, number format exception, index out of bound. Don't worry about this. We'll discuss all this theoretical part, the types of classification individually in each and every session, the forthcoming sessions. Okay. So index out of bound, array index out of bound exception, string index out of bound exception. Throwable means another part is exception is one category means error. So stack overflow error, virtual machine, out of memory error. These errors may happen. So the for all the errors, the root is throwable. All thing the root is throwable. So throwable are further classified into exception and error. Okay. So checked exceptions we already clearly mentioned that. Okay. So what and all coming in the checked exception? This IO exception, SQL file not found exception. These categories. Okay, so this exceptions IO SQL class not found exception is coming under the checked exception category because at the time of compilation itself, it is telling IO exception. I best example this file input string we already discussed. If I'm not giving this IO exception, it will throw an error. So check it at compile time itself. See here. At line number 18 and 19 we are getting this error because we are not handling that exception because we can't give the guarantee definitely we'll have that file in that location, or if that file is not present we will handle that situation. No guarantee for two scenarios. One is for the file should be present or not. Next one is about we will if the file is not present we will handle that situation or exception. So there is no guarantee. That's why initially at compilation time itself it giving the message, okay, handle that exception. Okay, add throws declaration. Add throws declaration. So file not found exception is there only for that line. In case if you are closing, okay, if you're not properly closing, that also creates a problem. For that, I'm adding IO exception. That's it. So IO exception is having the capable to handle this file not found and then closing also. That's why this file IO exception is replaced by there is a what exception already have file not found exception is handled by now IO exception itself. Instead of giving file not found exception, instead of that I am giving IO exception. It is capable of handling this type of exceptions, both file input stream and in file opening and closing. Okay. So back to the topic. This IO exception file not found exception compile time itself it will be checked. Okay, so you should handle by try catch block or declaring using throws. Now we are discuss only declaring using throws. In the forthcoming session, we'll discuss about the try catch concept. Okay, now we are handling that exception using throws concept only. So compiler forcing us. That is what you are clearly mentioned. Compiler forces handling. Example situations are file handling, database. How we have used the file concept. Likewise, you can use the database concept. If the database is a present or not, you have to handle that exception earlier itself. Okay, so that particular database or table is not present or database is not connected properly, you have to handle that exception. Network exception also the same thing. The socket connections you have to check it. Unchecked exception, what is that? Which inherit the runtime exceptions are known as unchecked exception. The class which inherit runtime exceptions are known as unchecked exception. Go to the diagram. These are called as a runtime exception. Arithmetic exception, what is that? Divide by zero. So there is no compilation error. At runtime only, we are going to handle getting this exception: arithmetic, null pointer, number format, index out of and out. Okay, we'll discuss the real time examples. Now just try to understand all these four type of exception is coming under the unchecked exception because it will check it at runtime, not compile time. But IO is equal class not found will coming under the checked exception category. See. So the class which directly inherit throwable class except runtime exception are known as and error are known as checked exception. Except this runtime and error remaining it is called as a checked exception. Unchecked means which inherits a runtime exception. Now you can able to understand the meaning of inherit. We already discussed about the inheritance. So runtime exception is a child class. It is going to inherit or extend the feature of exception. So that is what we have clearly mentioned here. which generates runtime exceptions. The classes which generate runtime exception are known as unchecked exception. So these are the subclasses here: arithmetic null pointer and all child class of this runtime exception parent class. So this going to inherit the runtime exception. That is what we clearly mentioned here. The class which inherit runtime exception are known as unchecked exception. These are the example for this runtime examples. Not checked at compile time. We already discussed this type of examples. Not checked at compile time. Example arithmetic exception. Divide by zero. No issues. Okay. See here. No issues. If I'm executing this, it will execute. 4 means it will give. Wait, I have to handle remaining things. Yeah. I'll comment this. So if I'm giving the input as 4, look at this output divide successfully. In case if I'm giving wrong input, if I'm giving the wrong input, you have to give. Okay, I'll delete these lines also now. It will give the output. If I'm giving the wrong input, the output is exception. Okay, so check it at runtime. He clearly mentioned checked exception is compile time, unchecked exception is not checked at compile time, check it at only at runtime. So error means it is irrecoverable. We it is not in our hand. Okay, it is based on the system facility out of memory. If you're having only the 500 MB, we are running out of the memory. We can't do anything. We are having only one MB or 1 KB. If you're having the memory, we can't able to do further memory. This is happening due to the out of memory error or virtual machine error, association error. So rarely it will happen. So caused by JVM or system failure. Can't normally handled by the programmers. It is not coming in the programmer category. Now just try to understand what is what around this. Okay. It indicates a serious problem. It is not in RN. It is the complete hierarchy of Java exception class. So object is the root class. So it is inherited by throwable. So throwable is inherited by exception and error. Exception means this runtime exceptions means arithmetic null pointer, array index out of bound exceptions will come here. Next, remaining, these are called as a checked exception. IO, SQL, file not found exception are coming under the what is that? Checked exception category. Errors separate part. So you should be clear with this hierarchy. Okay. So exception is recoverable, error is not recoverable because exception checked by compiler sometimes not many times. Okay. Example, these things. Okay. So file not found or interrupt exception sometimes compare itself tell not many times because why you're telling us sometimes means here see we may have the error in the future I mean exception but it is not encountered by compiler. This is the reason we are giving as a sometimes error. There is no possibility of showing by compiler itself. This is purely a system failure. This is a program logic. As a developer you have to understand or user should give the right input. It will be handled by try catch block in the upcoming session. Error not handled by them. Okay, it's a system fault. It's I know this is a detailed session, but it's very important. If you clear these theoretical concepts, then you can easily understand the upcoming hands-on exercise. If you found this session useful, then like the video, subscribe to the channel for more update, and share it with your friends. Thank you for watching.